I'm Lisa Anderson, president of LMA Consulting Group, and we are here today with four global experts in supply chain and leadership, and we're going to be talking about cash uncertainty, navigating the supply chain landscape. There's definitely a lot going on in today's supply chain world. We're in definite timeframes of what I refer to as VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And companies that can navigate this successfully and think beyond getting over the next roadblock are going to have more opportunities than ever before in history, I believe. So we're going to talk about it today and talk about how you can get to be one of those companies that end up wildly successful. So we're joined today by David Ogilvy from Australia, Diane Garcia from Phoenix, Arizona, and Karen Wilson-Starks from Colorado. And we'll start with that. We'll talk a little bit about the uncertainty, and then we're going to spend more of our time going into how do we navigate successfully through this period of time and take advantage of the opportunities that exist. So I guess to kick us off, we all are, somewhat aware, but we definitely have had our share of challenges when it comes to tariffs that have thrown some uncertainty into the mix. Also, there's geopolitical risks that are heightened, to say the least. We have had wars going on around the world and supply chain choke points that have been halted in their tracks, from the Suez Canal with the Houthi rebels to the Panama Canal due to a drought, and certainly the South China Seas due to, well, I guess China's aggressive behavior. And then, we've had lots of other uncertainty from the demand side of the equation, but I'll kick it off and we'll see what the rest of the group is finding. So I guess we'll start with David. So what are you seeing, David, in terms of uncertainty in your world?
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for having me. It's interesting that we titled the webinar today Cash Uncertainty, because as you mentioned before, we've had a plethora of uncertainty and the volatility that you mentioned in VUCA before. So I guess in some respects, the certainty that I'm seeing going forward is the fact that we're still going to be facing uncertain times. That's potentially where the certainty lies. Particularly, I guess, while you've got Trump in the office, he certainly is, pardon me, one of these characters that seems to shoot from the hip, so to speak. And his tariff activities in the US is certainly having some impact. As I was just saying to you off camera before, Australia really has not had any major impacts from the tariff regime that Trump has put forward until just recently, when you reduce the small quantities exemption from the tariffs. That is now starting to have an impact on Australia, but up until then we've had no real impact at all. So the challenges we've got, and there is a lot of certainty in this area, and that is energy prices. Manufacturing firms in this country have had to deal with ever escalating energy prices for a long time, and there is going to be no change in that anytime soon. Only yesterday, our inflation numbers were released by our Bureau of Statistics here in Australia, and we're growing at back out nearly 3% again now. But the energy component of that was at 15%. And that wow. 15% increase in energy prices was including government subsidies that they were handing to households to cover the increase in energy. So when those subsidies go, our energy prices are going to go 20, 30%. Now, manufacturing firms cannot afford another 30%. That's the certainty.
I would agree, David, and I'm going to turn it over to Diane and Karen, but I wanted to add from an energy standpoint, because you're absolutely correct, that the really uncertainty in terms of energy prices when it looks at the US has been a problem, because they had been going up pretty significantly, but they're on their way down as we're expanding our energy supply, and that will definitely help with the certainty in the US. So you're right, it just depends on where you are in the world. So Diane, what do you see in terms of our certain world?
Well, I agree with David that the uncertainty will continue on. I think there's more stabilization on its way, but one of the things you didn't mention in your list of all the events or disruptions are things like climate events that have happened. And, we've seen different issues on the East Coast, West Coast in the United States. And when all of that disruption happens, it just puts those manufacturing companies and those who aren't able to drive over to work because things have happened, due to the climate changes. So I think there's just always going to be these blips and these issues and disruptions, but I do think that there is more stabilization on the way. And the clients I've been working with have been working to see how they can survive until some of that stability is returned. Lisa, we mentioned earlier that's how companies are navigating and managing these things. And one of those ways is to hold on to cash and like optimize the use of cash. So there's been a lot of inventory reduction initiatives here, and just how do you continue to verify that you have what you need and only what you need as demand changes occur and those disruptions continue and carry on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We should definitely circle back to that topic as well. That's partly the name, but cash and certainty, because uncertainty requires more cash, if you will. And actually, another aspect that I didn't mention up front is the transformation that's occurring with AI and advanced technologies, and that's reverberating through supply chains as well, which provides opportunities, but it also provides uncertainty. So, Karen, what do you see from a uncertain certainty point of view?
Yes, and I'll be speaking more from the executive leadership perspective, as all of you are supply chain experts and I'm a leadership expert. And so we know that excellent leadership is required in times of change, in times of volatility and uncertainty. And we're certainly in that kind of inflection point right now. And so I think that even when there's tremendous uncertainty and a lot of change in the external world, within a company, leaders have to figure out some ways to create some stability. And so that's a lot about what I'll be kind of referencing. And what I'll remind people about, and this is kind of like from my psychology background, is that when people are unclear, when they are confused, they tend to freeze and either don't do anything or they will be extremely conservative. And that may or may not be the best way to go in the long term. So those are the things that I think are really important. And I'm thinking about companies even beyond manufacturing companies. This is business in general, especially big corporations. And when they can afford to wait in times like these, they often do. And that affects suppliers and other people who are connected with them.
Karen, it's interesting you say that because Diane said before that there's a lot of inventory reduction activities going on in the US. Because Australia is so geographically far away from everywhere else and we are such an importing nation, we've actually got a different dynamic, and I think it falls into your freeze analogy, because with the uncertainty in the volatility in the supply chain, most people are here in Australia are comfortable to carry the inventory cost, even though they don't actually know what that cost is. They just have this emotional understanding that I'm safer when I've got big inventory buffers, and therefore I don't actually have to do anything about it. When in reality, we should be in Australia undertaking those inventory reduction programs and taking action. But to your point, the leadership are frozen and are not doing anything.
Well, I think that's a good segue into, let's talk about inventory and cash, how it relates to this topic, because I agree with you. Some companies are definitely, more companies than not, are looking to reduce inventory, at least in the US, to better manage cash flow, have money available to invest, etc. With that said, though, there are some companies that are doing, as you said, David, and they are seeing inventory as a way to ensure that they have the product they need. I think the real answer is to be resilient, to be predictive, to have the right inventory, of course, in the right place at the right time. but it's also not all about inventory. I see it as like, why not keep some talent stores, if you will? So like have the right people. Like I can't tell you how many clients we've fought or negotiated with, I guess, when they have like a critical area that the machine shop, as an example, might stop the entire facility from producing, and they're like not wanting to have one extra person in the machine shop, even though they have all these people going on vacations. And like in one client, every year it was very dependable. They all went on vacation around the holidays for like a month. And then they were like surprised that they couldn't get everything out the door, which is of course not surprising. With that said though, you know, we were trying to convince them to hold extra people or to train up additional people in those skills. One would think that would be simple to do, but it's not necessarily simple to get through corporate environments, but it is an option. So anyway, if you are manufacturing, you can store more talent, maybe critical raw materials, or you could store inventory in strategic locations. But anyway, that's some of what I've seen. Diane,
Well-
you know, what do you
Well,
think?
you know,
Or
I
go
wanna
ahead, David.
comment- I want to comment
It's
on
like
that too.
having excess inventory to cover a buffer. What you're looking for there is having extra capacity to cover the buffer.
That's right. That's right. It's exactly right. And I mean, the definition of a safety stock is really to cover for unexpected demand or supply changes, which we're in right now. Demand and supply are changing pretty frequently, but that is the objective. To your point, you can cover it in many ways with capacity as well. So go ahead, Karen. If you
Yeah,
want to speak
because
to the
since you're
talent
talking about talent, you know, that kind of relates to the leadership area. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of my recommendations is that even though it may seem counterintuitive, when we're in such a tech world right now, and we've got AI and various other things that people can invest in, I think it's even more important right now to invest in people and the talent in people, and particularly in manufacturing, because there are critical roles and jobs that require a background that's not acquired overnight. And so if you have to grow that talent in the future from the ground up, you're going to be behind the power curve. And since the pandemic, we've been talking about this on these, you know, sessions before, that even since the pandemic, there's been a talent shortage and war of sorts. And so there'll be less qualified people available and more demand for the available people. And you can't wait until that time to get the people. So I think that investing in people is one of the wiser things that can be done, and especially those in critical roles that are not easy to train up and that take a lot of skill and a lot of education in order for them to be prepared. And I think that unfortunately, people are thinking in terms of the short game rather than the long game, and therefore they're going to cut the people and then mess up the long game. So to me, invest in the people, have them in place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
I agree.
Diane, what do you
And
think?
there were several thoughts stemming from my when you were talking, Karen, that I could talk to, because you brought up topics that relate to how do you bridge the talent gap, and how could you potentially use some of the AI technologies that are fastly approaching us. The one thing I was going to mention on the inventory side is that, you do want to reduce inventory, but you want to make sure you're reducing in the right areas. So a lot of the time working with clients is really understanding your full demand picture, because you don't want to just increase safety stocks to do that. You want to make sure that you have the right levels. And so you spend a lot of time understanding your demand. Inventory is a result of your processes being in control. If you understand your demand and what will come forward, if you know what kind of capacity you have and how you can bring all of that together, then of course the inventory will stay in control with that process. But that's really what I've seen clients trying to balance, and helping them with the sales inventory operations planning process has been really a key project initiative, so that they can put that in place and keep everything balanced with all of this uncertainty that keeps arising in one way or another.
I agree completely.
It's interesting that a lot of organizations misunderstood what just in time meant, right? because I think we all understand that just in time didn't mean no inventory. It just meant the right inventory in the right condition in the right place. And so you know, and you only invest you only invest in the inventory in its rawest material condition as possible, so you don't add too much non-value added, etc. And so, but to your point about sales and operations planning, or SIOP, as you guys work in there, again, it's a philosophy that's not well understood. And it's a philosophy that needs to be understood along with just-in-time concepts, to make sure you do have the right inventory buffers in the right place at the right time. But because they don't understand those concepts well enough, then they don't apply them properly enough.
Well, and I know, David, one of the things you're expert is really around the ERP systems that help fuel all of this, you know, transactional capabilities. So I know that it's not just understanding the concepts and understand the process, but it's how do you use your systems to put all of that in place. And that could take a long time to get through. How do you set this up? And then how do you keep any new talent, you know, understanding all of that, as well as keeping that talent that you have that keeps it steady.
And what's making that jump for executives difficult, I think, is a lot of the hype around AI. Because you mentioned AI before, and it's going to be the panacea of everybody's problems. Well, sorry, I've been around the tech world for a very long time now, unfortunately, and that's just not going to be the case. AI will have some major impacts at some point in time, but at the moment, is it a fledgling technology, and it's going to take quite some time before it actually delivers. Now, you know, obviously my brand's got AI in it, but for us, that stands for actual intelligence. So we actually apply real human intelligence to the circumstance. We don't rely on the artificial intelligence, because that's not delivering yet.
Well, I think the combination is really key, you know, for the future and everything that you guys are talking about. And if people can use the technology solutions to have a better way of predicting what's going on, first of all, understanding what's going on in the business now, also predicting what's likely to happen in the future, so that the planning is not just something that they made up. They actually have some real data that they can depend on to make some of these tough decisions that we're talking about. So that's still going to be a combination of tech and people in order to come up with that. That people alone probably aren't enough, but I don't think the tech alone, from what you're saying, is not enough either. But the key is to be able to do what I'm going to call the scenario planning that's necessary. And that's where those extra systems are going to be really important, because you got to have the right data, as we've talked about before too.
Well, and I would, so absolutely, like, we'll go to AI next. However, to recap what we've said so far and see if we have anything to add to it. One of the strategies that we talked about is to create certainty by having the cash, because no business can grow without cash. It's just it's going to be a complete bottleneck if you don't have cash. So what we're seeing,
growth consumes cash. It eats your cash up.
It eats cash for sure, because you have to pay the your suppliers before you get paid many times, and if you're growing fast, it's like the quickest way to run out of cash many times. Yep. So from that point of view, what I would say is that we're looking at, you know, reducing inventory in a smart way, right sizing inventory. It sounds like, to put the right inventory in the right place at the right time, with planning, advanced planning type processes to reduce inventory levels is one of the things we talked about. I completely agree on SIOP, sales, inventory, operations planning. It really is about predictive demand planning. So looking at where you're going in the future, not trying to trail what's been happening. So, you know, thinking forward, gaining customer input, and you know, and putting that all into the sales forecast that you can then translate into, like Diane was saying, capacity and operations plans, so that you can put all this together and get, you know, inventory at the, you know, you could right size your inventory, if you will. you also can mitigate some risks along the way if you're producing it in the right locations, in quotes. And, you know, you have the right sources of supply and the right talent, as we were talking about earlier. So so it sounds like we have inventory, which also relates back to SIOP, which had a heavy emphasis from what we were saying on the demand planning process and the predictive and resilient insights that have to be incorporated into changing conditions like we're seeing today. And then we started on the topic of AI and advanced technologies and the use of ERP systems, right? And so I guess from that point of view, maybe we can go into that a little bit more as to what we're seeing as to how we can create some certainty with ERP and advanced technologies. Like, for example, like we see clients, the more that we can help them upgrade their use of their ERP system, and if they need it, upgrade to a more modern ERP system, but mainly upgrading the use of ERP and optimizing the use of ERP and expanding it with some AI type tools that can predict and, you know, support SIOP, that can, you know, business intelligence type tools are helping to provide some of the certainty needed to not just have, you know, to be able to deliver sales plans and, you know, reduce inventory levels to the point that makes sense. And that could get us into this whole topic of AI, though, as far as you know, like AI versus talent. And, you know, like there was this study, I may as well bring it up and then we can go into, I'll let you each talk about AI and advanced technologies, but there was a study by MIT that basically said that only 5% of AI solutions are effective at this point in driving the results. Although I have to say, I think it just drives it back to leadership, because our clients certainly don't have that kind of horrible statistic. So it depends on how you're implementing it. You can't just say, actually, Diana and I had a client that said this one time, but you cannot say, I have this system, and so now it should just solve my issues. Like, why is it not fixed? You have to have the system be used by the people and understanding, you know, educating what's going on there. So with that said, I don't know, I guess I'll turn it to Diane first, since we worked with that particular example, but, you know, do you have anything to add to this technology?
The main thing I
AI?
have to add about AI, and I guess 5% sounds small, and like Lisa said, it seems very like a poor rating, but I do think that that 5% has been, you know, needed. And I think we're going to jump 10, 15, 20, 30% here quickly, just because of the advancement that we've seen just from this summer, from last summer. And I think that, you know, like David was mentioning and Lisa mentioned, it's not some, you know, complete solution, at least at this state. However, I do think that there are impactful ways AI is, you know, infiltrating the supply chain. There's a lot of just subtle technologies that have come in and we use day to day. We may not even realize how much, you know, something you do today is just taken for granted and it's just part of your day to day. And it wasn't like that even 12 months ago. I know on client examples for myself, you know, there are AI agents that can go into an ERP system and do some of the tasks that you would need someone doing, that data entry or analysis, and AI can learn. You just have to invest that time to train it and get it to assist you in those types of activities. Now, is that a complete game changer? No, but if you now have a tool that you've trained and you know, understand its environment, that can go a long way very quickly overnight. And I think that's what we're about to see, is that those big leaps and bounds here that are upon us.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it.
I think it's important to understand how AI is actually working. Because one of the things we've been learning over time is the amount of data that's required to actually teach these agents things. And so while you have the agents who are private, because there's the public-private argument going on about where your data goes and its sovereignty and confidentiality, et cetera. But so when you look at ChatGPT as the prime example, right, there are trillions of articles and books and websites that it has learnt from to date. And then you look at the process, like all technologies, it's not a linear growth cycle or capability line, really. So ChatGPT released 5 recently, and it bombed. And so it was a huge step backwards. Now, I wasn't surprised by that, because only because it's not linear, and things will change. And so, yep, I think that's to be expected. And that's the bit that people need to understand. This is not linear. It's not going to grow quickly. And what it takes to teach these agents the things. So if you have an agent running on your data, how much of your data do you have that it's going to learn from? Because it's not going to learn very much if the data doesn't change very much. And you don't add new data to it, well, there's nothing there for it to learn from. And so there's a whole series of things here about how AI is going to be applied and what it can do for us. As you mentioned before, Diane, there's a lot of people saying AI can do the sales entry process. Well, we've had AR and AP automation for quite some time. This is just a different tool to achieve the same outcome, in my view, right? So I am a bit of an AI skeptic, so to speak. I believe it'll turn the world upside down at some point, but I just don't think we're there now, and I don't think we're there anytime soon. We are, I think, years away before it becomes really, really valuable. Now, having said that, in the medical field, for example, where they've been using these things to help with diagnoses and those sorts of things, it's streets ahead of business applications. But at the moment, I think the agent pieces are quite rudimentary, if that's the right word. And then comes the extra complexity. How many of these agents are you going to have running in your business? And how do you stitch all of those together to make them a unified, well-organized force? So you think about the complexities that are in an ERP system, and now overlay that with the complexities that the AI needs. The manufacturing firm is going to become a tech company to be able to use all of this properly.
It's going to industrials, if you will, next. AI is. I think that, I mean, I agree with you to some degree, David, but I also see that there's like fast sprints going on with some significant results. And so I think it's, I don't think it's going to be like overnight you've become a success. I think, like the early adopters and people who are willing to trial and use some of the AI features are going to win the battle. But the other thing is the ERP systems are doing the same thing. So like SAP and Oracle are embedding it, which is different from just adding on, like you're saying, like a hodgepodge. So they're more or less, they're embedding it into the system. So of course they have more funds available. We go back to the cash side of things. But that's going to give them a definite advantage, because you can then just, follow your orders, or, and just have it tell you what's going on, with exceptions as an example. So I think that there's a lot of progress, but it's at the point where they're like, turning from technology into use case right now. So I think that there's like a lot of like, I don't know, a lot of sub softwares like supply chain visibility, and you can also like look at obviously sales forecasting, demand planning has been around forever, but it's using more AI type capabilities, predictive maintenance kind of things. So like you said, it's not going to take over for ERP systems anytime soon. I don't even know if it ever will, because ERP is more transactional based. But I think if the companies that embed it in and or like embrace it and utilize it will be speeding by their competition, perhaps.
Well,
so that's what I'm seeing.
I'm certainly looking forward to seeing where the use cases come from. And I think it's fair to say that all of the big systems, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and all of the rest of them, that are leveraging off, whether it's AWS in Infor's case or whatever it happens to be, they're all looking for where that valuable use case is, and they're all trialing these things. I'm just not sure they've cracked that nut yet. They will.
Yeah, well,
but the
real agreed. Value, it's not necessarily, I don't even think it's going to be like, I mean, it's a good thing, like, to have these kinds of debates, right? Because I think both sides have like some merit. With that said, though, I don't even know if there's going to be a nut to crack per se. There's going to be like sprints of progress, and like, I guess if you wait for perfection, you're going to start from really far behind. So you may as well do some sprints along the way, is the way I
That's
see
fair.
it. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
By no means is somebody going to be able to, like most companies that we work with, struggle to use their ERP systems effectively to do some, what I would call, well, some basic functions and some
Yep.
advanced functions, let alone AI, but they're going to need to get to that point sooner versus later. And like the newer generations, like we'll turn it over to Karen with AI in a second here, but newer generations also are like, don't even, according to one of our clients, they don't really even understand how to work with things if it's not in the computer in today's world, which is like a whole
Yeah.
different thing from all of us that are on this call. So it's like, we have to, figure out how to evolve here over time. But what do you
And I
think,
think
Karen? There's like this whole
Sorry,
AI,
Karen.
or go
one
ahead,
other
David.
thing, and I'll let you go, Karen. Sorry. The important point there, Lisa, was the fact that the usage, and you're 100% right. There's a plethora of companies out there who don't even use their ERP systems properly. I've got one client who's on SAP, and they were using spreadsheets to calculate their MRP. Now it's inbuilt in the system, right? And they have the
Multiple
tool,
people.
and exactly, and they don't use it. And if we're not careful, AI is going to be the same. We're going to have all of these tools that nobody can use properly, with an expectation it's just going to be the magic wand. Sorry, Karen, go for it.
Well,
Yep,
I
digital
think
transformation is going to be a key here. And you can't start with the end and not do any of the basics. Doesn't work that way. So Karen, I know it doesn't work that way. So you tell us about like how that's true.
well, I think my comment that kind of it goes with what all of you are saying is this: there's a mindset that's important in today's time, and it's a mindset that accepts the reality that yesterday is not necessarily going to look like today or tomorrow. It's a mindset that says that change will continue. It's a mindset that says change will become in many ways more rapid. So therefore, we'll need to master and understand our tools even more, because we won't necessarily have the luxury of a lot of time to figure out the benefit and the data that we can mine from those tools. So I think from a leadership perspective, I think that the executive leader has got to communicate the message that we are in a time when there's daily change, and that the people have to be ready to obtain information from multiple sources simultaneously. So it might be from the tech systems that you're talking about, AI, ERP, whatever, they may be. And they also have to learn how to use their other data in their company that may not exactly be in those systems. There are conversations that need to be had internally, because there are different perspectives and experiences in the company, which allows a different vantage point. When you come together and share the vantage point, you're going to learn more. That's important for understanding the future and what to do. Client conversations, research that may be being done in the academic schoolhouse right now, and other industries, other companies who may be further down the track, and there are lessons that can be learned from them as well. So I don't think anyone can afford to be complacent or to wait until later. You have to have your feelers out in all these different directions, and then see what are the messages that we're gaining, and how does it relate to our business and industry? How does it relate to our company right now? And how does that drive the kind of decision making that we need to do? Because some of what you've done in the past will still be relevant, and other things will not. And all of it is going to require new learning in the future.
Well, and the thing
Very
I wanted
true.
to add about, and you kind of ended with this new learning idea, is that, you mentioned that the companies are not utilizing and leveraging the tools with ERP and what currently resides. However, I do think AI has a different ability to actually help make sense of all those technical things that if you had training and you were a person who was invested in these systems, you would have that behind the scenes. But you can talk to AI and make sense of how to utilize the ERP systems. You can make sense of maybe you're plugging some gaps that you didn't have access to because you didn't have an SAP or an Oracle, but you have a lower tier system, but you use an agent to kind of plug in a few of those gaps that you weren't able to do before. So I do think that it's going to be more accessible for every manufacturer, which if you know how to use it, you can get there, just like these, better products or higher quality products, however you want to look at these larger systems. But I also think that the newer generations are they don't have to learn it in that way because AI will help interpret things that they're kind of essentially like grabbing information from all over the world and then, boiling it down into something that they can interpret and then say, okay, now let me make a decision. So I think AI is going to assist that generation to kind of come up to speed in that way.
I think that's right, but there's an element of trust. And I don't know that AI has built the trust yet. And there's a lot of work involved in building trust. And the reason I say that is there's a big splash in the Australian financial press only this week about Deloitte's have delivered a report to the government because the government does a lot of work with them for some reason. And it is clear that AI has written the report because it's had massive amounts of hallucinations. So it is using citations that are not real. And the people who actually ran the study that was cited have said, we did not say that. Right? And so,
well, I think that's going to be an advantage for all of us on this call, actually, because you do need experts to help you sift through it and understand what's relevant, what makes sense.
and
I mean, you really need that more.
So if you've got these people who are relying on AI to understand these things and to make these interpretations, do you actually trust what it's giving you? Because at the moment they're hallucinating.
Yeah, it's true, and making up incorrect information is a real issue. So I mean, I agree. Like for example, I recently been looking at this supply chain visibility software, Project 44, and they do an amazing job actually of keeping track of all, it's not just GPS, but they use I forget what it's called, but basically they can see exactly where everything is at all points in the supply chain so that you can also do scenario planning. I don't remember if it was David or someone brought that up earlier, maybe it was Karen, but scenario planning, which also relates to SIOP, because that's what you really want to do, and in the use of digital twins. So there's like so much technology integrated with process that none of which is going to go anywhere without the talent. I mean, it actually deeply concerns me actually that, some of the larger companies, or probably all companies, we won't blame it just on the large ones, but, as they're implementing AI, they're like, well, I'm not needing any entry-level people because they can be replaced by AI, which is somewhat true. However, what in the world are we going to do to get them up to speed so that, like, the baby boomers are at least in the US are retiring at like a fast rate, as obvious as it would be obvious, because they're getting older. The generation following them, Gen X, is not nearly as large, and they're running around with chickens with their heads cut off, basically. And so we need to bring like the newest generations up to speed some way or other. So like, I don't know how we're going to bridge that gap, but I think it goes back somewhat to what Diane was saying. Like, we have to find a better way to educate, do apprenticeships, go back to some of the old school things, allow for trialing, testing, what's the other, mentoring, etc. But like, I guess Karen, that kind of circles back to you, but that's what I'm thinking. I mean, we can't afford to like just not have any entry-level people. I mean, what in the world? We have to build our people here.
I think that's fair, at least in this country. We've got a number of generations of mid-manager levels. Some of them are getting into the senior levels now, who have never seen a recession in this country. So they've never understood what it takes to run a business in difficult times.
Well, actually, I have something to say about that, because I want to turn it over. It's a perfect time to turn this to Karen. And that is, Chip Espinoza, I just did a supply chain bite on this topic, but Chip Espinoza is a leader, is a expert in generational, I don't know, employees. I can't remember the right word, talent, we'll say. Anyway, he basically says that the Gen Z generation is not too familiar with managing with ambiguity, which is a huge problem if if we're going to automate everything and the rest is pretty much dealing with ambiguity. And the reason he's saying that is that, like, for example, the Generation Z has been like dealing with rubrics that tell you exactly how you get an A in a class, which didn't exist when I was in school. So like, it makes total sense that that would be the situation we're in, but it's not a good situation to be in. And we have to find a way to get like this, all generations to work together and to understand how to move forward. But so Karen, like, what do you think
Oh,
about
yes.
this topic?
I'm totally agreeing with the necessity for what I'll call intergenerational, cross-generational learning. There are things that the younger people can share with those who are more elder in the workplace and vice versa.
Thanks,
And I
Karen.
think that I think yes, and mine is interspersed in there, but I think that the older generation in the United States is retiring, not just because they're older, they're also retiring because there's not been a valuing of the expertise that they're bringing and can bring to the workplace. And if we lose all of that overnight, it's going to adversely affect business, the companies, and the younger generations. I'm even doing a project right now where I'm working with some young people who are overseas in the Middle East, and they're really hungry to learn. And some of the basics of leadership that I might have learned 50 years ago, they don't know. They truly don't know
yeah.
this information, and it's baseline. So I do think there's room for, and I know, David, you're famous for always saying, the basics, you still need the basics. We still need the basics even in this time, because without those, we're not going to get the clear kinds of responses to the questions that we are asking. And so I do think that that's really important. And I would say that one of the things that leaders can do right now, executive leaders, is really show how that integration is important, how the mutual learning is important, and value that in the workplace. I also think that, and using the data that's available, and I say data now, I'm not just talking about the hard data that we normally are thinking about, it's all forms of data, by using it to great effect so that the scenario planning makes sense, companies will be able to make better decisions more quickly. And I would say, don't be afraid if, let's say you make a decision, we're going in this direction, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and the scenario changes again, you can always change. So you change again if necessary to adjust to whatever is going on, but it's the continuous learning and not just saying, okay, now we've arrived and this is it. No, we have what we need for now, and it may be something different tomorrow, and that's okay, because that's the landscape.
Yeah, very true. Diane, what do you think? I know you're you're connected
Youngest of all of us.
to yeah, you are the youngest of all of us, but you're connected anyway to up and coming people. So what's your thought here?
I heard earlier when I don't know who said it anymore, but it was like, we have to figure out how to solve this because they're not good with dealing with ambiguity, but think of all the things that they are, much more in shape or ready for when it comes to, most of them have their whole lives been around these tools. They don't think the same way, and they don't need to think the same way because they have more available at their fingertips than when we went to school and we had to study and learn and understand where all these things came from. It's a pro and con, I think, in a way. And I see AI is helping to bridge some of that. Now, is it going to solve everything? Of course not. But I do think it's a way for us to interpret information and share information, and that younger generation is just more equipped to take it and run with it. So those are the generations or the employees that perhaps you say, hey, go build an AI agent and see what it does
Yeah.
and see if it's successful. Just like when I started at an aerospace company, they said, here's a greenbelt project as a newcomer, and go figure out how to, fix this bottleneck or, upgrade this process. And so that was the way that I learned. But these AI tools could be that same kind of tool for it. So
I think that's a great idea. I think they still need to hire them and give them those types of assignments so that they can develop. I mean, they're going to save plenty of money anyway, because there's going to be huge returns on investment. So I think they'll get to that point overall. Right now, I think they got a little carried away, thinking, well, we don't need any, and we don't need to hire anyone, and it'll be all fine. But they'll get, and of course I'm making broad statements. That's not true based upon the company. There's some companies that are fabulous. I really think there's going to be, I've been saying this for like probably a couple of years now. I think it's going to come true. And that is that I think it's probably you can call it the best time or the worst time to be in business. But basically, I think there'll be more opportunities than at any other time in history. Like before, I would say, since the Great Depression, because there was more companies that rose to the top of their industry and were wildly successful during the Great Depression than at any other time in history in the United States. And that's because they thought forward and invested when everyone else panicked, if you will. And I'm not saying that because we're going through another Great Depression. I really don't think so, and I certainly don't hope so. But I think it's more that we are going through that amount of change between not just the tariffs, but all the supply chains moving around due to geopolitical risks and people realizing that, they tried, in some cases, they tried to follow the fad, and the fad was not the best thing all along. And sometimes it's changed. So we have to start thinking, use critical thinking skills, and also the tools that are available. But I think there'll be more opportunities than at any other time. So the people who embrace it, don't go crazy following all the fads, and don't forget to, remember you have every company I've ever worked with has somebody in the company that they probably don't listen to, but that knows what's going on. And by all means, ask that person, does this make sense? Because they'll tell you. And don't be upset if they say no, because there's probably something wrong.
Well, Lisa, you had a way of kind of showing, or things that you've learned about what stability we do see on the forefront, like with the Tax Act and all the, encouraging things we're seeing for the manufacturing side. So maybe just
I'll be happy to talk about that. It's one of my favorite topics. So basically I see it as there's a three-leg stool that is required for manufacturing to be successful. And we're getting to the point where we're going to have all three legs in place. And I believe that we're going to have more opportunities than ever before, and that they'll start showing up by early 2026. So what are the three stools? They are, number one is the taxes and cost structure, if you will. So basically, the Tax Act in the United States had to be passed, which was also called this one big beautiful bill. But basically what it did is it confirmed the corporate tax rates and the small business tax advantages to carry into the future. Otherwise they would have expired, and we would have went from 21% tax rate, which is competitive with the world, to 35, which is not. So that was huge. Nobody was going to make any certain decisions if they were going to go to 35% tax rate. In addition to that, taxes in that stool is a focus on deregulation, which is one of the biggest costs that go into manufacturers, and a focus on energy, as David has said. One of the biggest costs that goes into manufacturers there's a big emphasis in improving both of those cost structures in the US by expanding capacity. SIOP is, if you expand the supply, the price is going to go down, which is what we're doing. In terms of energy, in terms of regulations, we're just slashing regulations so that they don't have as many regulations that they have to follow. Obviously, some common sense regulations will be good, but if you look at the history of regulations, it went berserk. There's no way you could follow all those regulations in the last X number of years. So that's number one. Number two is tariffs, which is kind of combined with the geopolitical risks. A lot of folks were thinking about changing due to geopolitical risks, and the US had been losing quite a bit of its manufacturing base. However, when we put the tariffs in place, for example, China stopped shipping critical minerals to the world, which is rather problematic. It leads you to believe that you better get your supply chain in order if you want to be able to use a phone, defend your country, or whatever. It's pretty much goes into everything. Go to the hospital because you won't have any medical devices. So from that point of view, the tariffs, like there's a lot involved in tariffs, but generally speaking, when the tariffs first went into effect, it created a lot of uncertainty because no one was really sure what was going to happen. But what's coming out of it on the other side is that for the most part, it's related to trying to get better stability from the world in terms of like these access to critical items and relationships with countries that are key partners in the future, like in working together. Although it seems very noisy in the process because we fight with these friends. But basically, if we come together and resolve it, like the tariffs and the geopolitical risk will come together. And it appears like at this point, businesses know what the tariffs will be, and if they can't figure it out, they can estimate quite well what they'll be. So basically, the tariffs one is largely resolved. By company, certainly not. If you're dependent on like China as an example, you should be very worried. But overall, it's, you know, you largely understand what your tariffs are, and you can now navigate your supply chains around them. So that's the second leg of the stool that we've gained a level of certainty on. The third leg, which is, you know, we have a client that is a equipment manufacturer, and so they're like bigger ticket items, and so you have to have cash, right? We're talking about cash in this call. So the third thing is access to cash, which you also need a reasonable interest rate to, well, if you think the interest rate's going to go down, who in their right mind is going to pay like 2 or 3 times the price because they have this really high interest rate, right? So it's caused a lot of companies to go on hold until the interest rates start coming down. So it appears like I had an economist on a radio show recently that has been quite accurate the last like 3 years and talking about interest rates. And what he said, I'll quote him because I'm not the expert here, but what he said is that when COVID occurred, there was a huge influx of money into the economy with stimulus bills, et cetera, for like a couple of years. That we had to work through. The only thing that causes inflation is a stimulus to the economy.
Government spending.
Infusion of money. Tariffs will cause a price increase, but it's a one-time price increase. It's not like fabulous thing to have, but your price goes up once, it doesn't keep going up. So what he was saying is that inflation, ongoing inflation is only caused by money stimulus, which we hadn't worked through. Even the COVID was like years ago. So just in August, we finally worked through the COVID stimulus. So now we're getting to the point where they're going to start cutting interest rates. To the degree of when they'll start cutting and how much, who knows? There's more that goes into it. But in the fall, and it appears like to get to stability, according to the economists, it'll be like 150 basis points, which is also what the Treasury Secretary of the United States is saying. So it seems like they're aligned. So the question is how long?
The unfortunate part there, Lisa, is that's a US-centric view.
It is.
Take an Australian view, we are diametrically opposed to those three. Our tax rates are going up. 85% of the world trade does not include the USA. So we are involved in and the tariffs have had very little impact on us. So there's been no beneficial activity in that space for Australia, at least. And the other one was the interest rates. Well, we have been having lower rates for quite some time, but our government spending is accelerating, not decreasing. So we have a high risk that even though our interest rates are coming down, that's going to fuel more inflation.
It'll
because
fuel the inflation, exactly.
Because they are spending it in non-value adding activities. So it's not adding to productivity. And that's the productivity is the only way to overcome inflation. Now, for an Australian perspective, that's a very negative feeling to hear all of those things you say of having the positive impact in the States. We're exactly the opposite to that. And you're talking about certainty. I am certain that our economy is going to continue to drop.
I am sorry to hear that, but I do agree with you, because I do think those three things are key. And the last thing you said is actually the last thing you said, I'll add into my tax/cost leg, and that is the productivity, right? Because it's in essence a measure of cost. But like that's where AI comes into play too, because AI has the opportunity to greatly reduce our cost. Not in people, as we've all been saying, at least not a lot of people. We're going to need more high-skilled people, and we have to train people. We won't need as many low-skilled people, but nevertheless, it'll be in that stool.
There's
That's
something
the
else I
reason
want to
why.
add.
Sorry, go, Karen.
I want to add to what we're saying here, because Lisa, I want to go back to what you were talking about, earlier, and tied in with what David's talking about now, which is this. And this is about when you were talking about the Great Depression. The businesses and the companies that were successful, they were the companies who were able to look around and to identify what does the world need now. And it may be different from what they had been manufacturing up to that point, and what is in our sweet spot of capability that we can offer. And what people needed in the Great Depression was some more basic kinds of things, food, shelter, clothing, but basic stuff. And they could sell more of that at the time. And the companies who were able to quickly be agile, nimble, and pivot to produce what was needed, they were successful. So I think in this time where we are now, we have to figure out, the companies have to figure out, what are our distinctives? What are we able to do? What is needed? What do people want? What are they willing to pay for? And then produce that. And that's going to require some change from what they may have been doing up till now. And that may get to the productivity thing, David, that you're talking about.
I can't agree with you more, really. I mean, I think that's absolutely true, is that things are going to dramatically change. I mean, just think about it. If you move even 25%, which is what I've been predicting, so we'll see how accurate I am. But even if 25% of the production moves out of China, for the US, I mean, to the US, that's dramatic. And that's going to change supply chains dramatically, because it carries with it all the raw materials, etc. And if we have like some of this nearshored, like supply chains are going to be completely changing. And that's before we think about what you're saying, Karen. And that's like consumers' needs are going to change. Business needs are going to change. Like AI is becoming hot topic in terms of, like, I did a recent supply chain bite on AI powered factories. So it's like manufacturing with AI, right? I mean, that's the future. So it's not like we're going back to our grandfather's like manufacturing environment or something, but we're going to have to figure out what the heck this does mean. So I agree with you completely.
I think in the business discussions about AI, there's an assumption about it's going to be low cost. But again, getting back to understanding how AI works, right? These tech companies have spent billions of dollars setting up the infrastructure for these AI agents and so forth, and they're going to want a return on that investment. And so if you understand the concept of tokens, right, within the AI agents, those tokens could, not say they will, but they could become extraordinarily expensive based on volume. So the more you use it, the more you're going to be paying. So that value proposition needs to be well understood.
Well, you're right. I mean, there is this like cloud is actually, well, cloud's not going out of style, like they're going to go on premise, but the subscription idea is like, everybody's,
but they're getting,
people don't like it anymore, but it is the way it is. So you are going to have to be careful about like you said, how you're prioritizing resources.
And that
so.
level of resistance is going to get to a point at some point where I think the pendulum runs the opportunity of turning and coming back. I'm not saying it will, but we all know the
It's bound to.
subscription costs for ERP systems today are significant, and you overlay that again with the cost of those tokens for those AI agents that you could be running, and they're all going to be volume based. So the more inquiries you make, the more you pay. That's going to get expensive.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. We're going to have to start using some uncommon common sense and thinking, critical thinking skills, etc. So I guess, we're largely wrapping up here. So I guess we'll do one brief thoughts from each of us, and then we'll wrap up the conversation. So who wants to start with
I'll
one
go
brief
first.
thought?
I
Okay,
think
go ahead.
the key message that you mentioned before, Lisa, is there are a stack of opportunities out there. We shouldn't be narrow-minded. I don't want to sound negative, because I'm just trying to pull these things apart so we understand them. But once you understand these things, the opportunities will open up for you. So there are a significant number of opportunities for us. And in my country, for example, the manufacturing has a huge opportunity to follow America's lead and bring manufacturing back into this country, because we have got it represents only about 8% of our GDP. It's practically
you have
nothing.
a opportunity in mining as well, which broadly can be considered manufacturing, but
we're a big quarry. But I think there is an opportunity for the manufacturing industry to make massive inroads and improvements in this country and support the other Asian regions. But my one takeaway is there's lots of opportunity.
Very good. Well, how about you, Diane?
I agree with David. Lots of opportunity. I know it's easy to get overwhelmed, and there's overwhelmed, with how to use the AI. And like David said, you don't want a hodgepodge of all these tools running around, but there is opportunity with them. And I do think that there's stability around the corner, even though there is always going to be, some disruptions, because these events and these geopolitical events will not stop. But there is more stability, especially like you were mentioning in the US. So I think now is the time for companies to start, stop hesitating. As Dr. Karen said, when you're unknown, you don't move and you don't make decisions. I think that it's time to start making those decisions and start moving forward.
Absolutely. What do you think, Karen?
Well, what I've been talking about so far is the importance of the executive leaders signaling to the organization that they have a way forward given what they are learning and what they know, and they're continuing to learn and to know more, and to be nimble and agile to change, to be creative and innovative along the way as they do that, so that they are producing what's of most value and what's needed for the times that we're in. Now, I'm going to add a ringer in here, and this which I haven't talked about yet in this conversation, but it kind of relates to a little bit to David, what you were saying about how that what we may see as an advantage in the United States may not necessarily be an advantage in other countries. I think this is huge. So to my especially United States partners and friends, I would say we have to be quite aware that it's important to have a viewpoint that's beyond a US-centric viewpoint. We must look at things from a much more global lens and understand that our partners may have unintended consequences for some of the choices that we're making. We also have to look at the erosion of trust that has occurred in this current era and time frame, because we have become more unpredictable as a nation to those who have operated and worked with us for many, many years. And there's a cost to that. And one of the costs is that people may find new partners, and those new partners may not include us in the future. So we need to be cognizant of that as a possibility. And I think all of us, including in the US, we need to be thinking about who will be the partners for the future, and investing in partners who, I'm going to say, share some of the values that are important to us. They don't have to have exactly the same values, but enough of a shared landscape that we can operate together moving forward. And I think that's what other countries, companies, and partners will be doing. And the US, we need to be prepared for that. we need to think about how to become a more reliable partner going forward. I don't think business as usual is really going to be the way forward if we want to be successful, because people have to see us as caring not only about our own interests, but also caring about our partners' interests as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're only, I guess that's a great way to close this out. But you're only as strong as the weakest link in your supply chain, and you really need to be careful about who you're partnering with, and you know, what's going on in those countries, and you know, along the way, if you think about global transportation, there's like one of the softwares I was talking about does crowdsourcing of like geopolitical events and other weather events, etc. That's going along. There's a lot to know in today's supply chain, and so we have to stay vigilant, and you have to understand your end-to-end supply chain. So I think that's my tip for the day. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next quarter when we talk about whatever is most relevant on your mind. Feel free to send us, drop us a line and let us know, you know, your feedback and what you'd like to hear about in future sessions. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you
Thank you
again.
so much.
See you, Karen. See you.